nice.
Very good.
I was going to say, I thought that goes on a little bit too long, but it actually cuts. I keep thinking it has another bit to it, but no, it's all right.
There is a much longer.
Is there a much
mix
longer
of that
version?
song. Yeah, I think there's a 3.5 minute version
Wow.
of that.
Wow.
If that genre of music is the sort of thing that you just like to listen to, in your spare time,
or if you want to see us painfully sit through 3.5 music without saying anything, that's also fun.
That's okay. Good feedback. We'll see if we can cut it down a little bit. Welcome to episode 3 of our Cult Products podcast, and we are still talking about brand, and we are still slightly worse for wear after going to see Limp Bizkit, because we are filming this episode right after episode 2. My dog has moved to the other side of the room now, so I've got the sofa all to myself, ready to get back into this. Yeah, and so I also,
right,
because we just took a quick break, and I went to the loo, and I remembered that bit in, I think it's Naked Gun, where he just leaves his microphone on. But also that bit in the Jinx when he just goes to the loo, and then he's like, "Oh my God, I killed them all." And do you remember that? Yeah,
and Trump as well. And then and Trump as well. Gordon Brown, was like a microphone left on as well?
I am just going to finish my banana though. That I also had.
Okay, well, while you finish your banana, shall I tee up the next question, which is,
yes, let's do it.
An interesting one, and one that we've got experience in both camps, so I think it'd be quite cool to answer. Can you be B2B and a B2C?
No. Let's move on. That's it.
Okay, done.
You just can't.
Just can't do it.
I don't think you can, and I don't think you should. And I think also, especially if you're starting a business, you shouldn't try and do both things simultaneously. I think it is really crucial that you focus on a specific customer persona when you are in that early stage. You figure out the things that you're doing that are going to change that person's life. You figure out how to communicate to that person, and you just focus on them. And I think the difference between a, B2C person, Adam, who's, on Instagram, sees an ad for something, goes in, buys it, great, to, Phill, who's sat doing procurement, or working in an office, wants to have a conversation with the sales team, wants a load of customer support afterwards, all of those kinds of things. That sales journey is really, really different. So and also both are really hard. So it's better to just focus on one thing and do it really, really well than it is to try and dilute across all those kind of things, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely think we've had that a lot, haven't we? Like when working with organisations and they've kind of put out like 5 different personas, and some of them are consumer personas and others aren't, and you have to put a flag down, because otherwise, like, how are you pointing that? You need to point the brand to someone, and it can't be everyone really, and it can't like fit everyone to, and like, that's why persona, identifying the users, really understanding like them and their frustrations, emotional functional needs, yada yada, and then really like kind of doing that persona weighting. I think it's really important, and narrowing it down to like, okay, look, we've got, even if it's 3 personas, we've got this one is the main persona that we're targeting. I think I can't stress how important that is at the early stage of brand, because you have to be able to point it out to someone. You need to understand like the brands that are in that person's ecosystem, what they can connect with, to design a brand that's going to be appeal to their senses, really. So simple as that. And I think a lot of organisations make mistakes, so they want to create this thing. We get that a lot in conversations where they're like, it's a bit of a B2C and it's also a bit of a B2B, and it's like, it's not easy, but you do have to channel it into something.
Yeah, and I'm tempted to say it's better to just have one persona than it is to have multiple personas at the early stages of a startup. I've definitely made the mistake in the past of creating, 7 or 8 different personas and getting into the weeds of, well, what's the procurement person going to think about this? And, you, to an extent, you do need to know those things and you do need to build for those people, but not really from a brand perspective so much.
Yeah.
But also, if you can just get one person to really fall in love with your product and drive that in their organization and be the flag bearer for it, and get other people, drag people on board, that's really how that stuff kind of works in the early days. I think you need a champion and a sponsor, and I think that's the persona that you actually need to create in order to do that. As far as sort of brands that kind of become B2B and B2C later, I think that's possible. I think it is when you're in that kind of mainstream position. There are obviously there are Microsoft products that are aimed at individuals, and there are Microsoft products that are aimed at businesses, and that's one brand. But again, back to what we said a couple of weeks ago, you can't really just ape the strategy of a massive tech company when you're a startup. You kind of have to be a bit more focused. There was a period of time where Apple were offering servers and things like that to businesses, and it was a total disaster because they just didn't have the support and things that at the time it was kind of mainly a Microsoft space they were able to offer businesses, and so they couldn't attract customers, and the customers that they did attract found a massive gap in service. And I think that is kind of inherent in that DNA of Apple as a B2C company, made it really difficult for them to then be kind of B2B as well. However, lots of people use iPhones at work, lots of people use iPads at work, lots of people use Macs, and all of those kinds of things. But I don't feel they would ever describe themselves as a B2B business or their brand as a B2B brand. But it is possible to have a consumer product that is so good that people end up using it at work, and to actually have functions and features that are useful to have at work. It's the same with, WhatsApp is a B2C product, but lots of people communicate with their colleagues on it. That I think it is possible. But in the early days of business, pick a lane, stick to it, focus on doing one thing really, really well. If you try and build something for everyone, you'll end up building, something for nobody.
Yeah. And ultimately, B2B brands don't have to be boring. In fact, they have to not be boring. And I think that's kind of like where, like, traditionally everyone's thought, agencies probably didn't touch like B2B brands because they were like, they're a bit more complex, they're a bit more harder to define, and they feel they're probably just not as cool or interesting. And I think Phill and I have realised that's all lies, because B2B brands and products can be and are really interesting. They're more complicated, they're more problems you have to solve, yes. But I think the value of bringing that to life is something that's really compelling, and it's super valuable for the user and for the founders. It just gives us a lot more pleasure and joy. I think it's the harder the nut to crack, the more that we like to crack it or try to.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I think there is a bit of a misconception that if it's a B2B brand, it's going to be less interesting than a B2C brand. And I don't think that is true. I think there are lots of B2B brands that are, really, really, really creative and compelling, and, have learned a lot. I think that probably was true to an extent.
Definitely.
But I think, the lines have become fuzzy.
Yeah.
The big difference, I suppose, is there's a sort of empathy thing that you have to have with a B2B brand, where you really have to understand the specific challenges and problems that you're trying to solve. Where I think sometimes with B2C things, it can be a bit more like, well, this exists because it's fun, or this, it's kind of more obvious on the sort of surface level what it is that the thing does, and why someone should buy it. Whereas B2C is
Yeah.
kind of like, what are we, getting into the weeds of the root of whatever problem somebody has.
Yeah, definitely. And then how that kind of brand trickles into like product. I think when we first started doing brand and product like this, there was no kind of real emphasis on brand in product space at all. And it was kind of like, well, it's for people at work, so why make it cool? Why make it an enjoyable experience? But obviously, no, the more people are interacting with stuff, that they've got less kind of patience for bad tech and bad design. So yeah, it's definitely something that shouldn't be overlooked, and it's something that we feel very proud of as a business, that we've gone down that route and we can make kind of those experiences people within businesses more enjoyable. So
yeah.
Cool.
Okay, good. So we're agreed. B2B or B2C, not and.
Yeah. There you go.
Stuff.
And one persona.
And one persona. We're putting that one out there. Just pick one. Can we talk a little bit about value propositions?
Go on, your favourite subject, I know.
Our favourite subject. Let me just sort of articulate a probably quite familiar problem. You land on the website of a B2B business and you find on there a bunch of stuff about features, functionality that the tech has, a couple of case studies maybe, and lots of pages under a section called product in the nav bar, about specifically what does the platform do. But after reading it, you're none the wiser about what it actually does. It seems to do either everything in the world or a million different little things. And you're not super clear on actually who is this for and why should I get it. That's the kind of external facing problem. But also, if you've ever worked for a business where, it does take ages to do branding and marketing and websites and all those kind of things, and nobody is able to clearly articulate what the business does, then your problem is, as a business, you're not clear on what your value proposition is, and you haven't got everybody to align and agree on that. And I think that, as basic as it sounds, knowing what your business does is a thing that actually escapes a lot of businesses and can really jam on the brakes in terms of growing that business, being able to sell a product, being able to create a compelling brand, being able to actually, create a product, knowing who your market is, all of those kinds of things. And when we talk about a value proposition, what that means is you should basically have a sentence that says, we help these people to do this thing and to realize this value by providing them with this thing. And so you need to be clear on three things there. You need to be clear on who it is that you're targeting. And sometimes businesses have that. You need to be clear on what you do. Most of the time, businesses know what their product is and, what their sort of field that they operate within is. But you also need to be super focused on what's the value that people get from using your technology. And fewer businesses are very clear on that. And that's a real shame, because that's actually the headline. That's actually the thing that people care about when they're thinking about using your product. Don't really care so much how it works. What I care about is, what problem does it solve? And I think the kind of classic quote is, nobody really cares about your product. They just care about their problems. And if you are super clear on that, then I think the brand that you're able to create is much, much more impactful.
Yeah, it is the cornerstone, isn't it? It's like the foundations to everything, the value proposition. And, we've been in businesses ourselves where they haven't been able to do that. I mean, we used to have a CEO that used to kind of stop people in the corridor and be like, what's like elevator pitch? Give it to me. and no one could give it to them because it was like no one got it. It was so it was kind of locked in his head. He could articulate what the proposition was, what value it had to business, but no one else could. And that kind of trickled into all the decks and all the like content, and all the salespeople had different views on it, and it just creates a real kind of mixed message within the business. And that's because it's just, it's in one person's head and not kind of down somewhere and cemented in everyone else's. And how do you then translate that across the business? So yeah, it is a huge problem, and it's an unbelievable amount of businesses that we work with that can't answer those things that Phil just pointed out, like unbelievable amount. And that isn't a problem. Like that's why we've got tools and things to help get those things, extract those things from kind of generally like C-suite people, and get that into something of substance, and keep it really simple, really defined, and really clear, and have that as the thing that you go back to. Obviously it can change and it will adapt, but really like that's as well, just having that thing that pins everything is critical.
Yeah. I think more often than not, the challenge with that is that you have a lot of people who don't agree on what it is. So they actually do have quite compelling value propositions, and there will be a couple of usually sales-facing people who have their own way of talking about something and it works, and they talk differently about what that value proposition is. And when you get them in a room, they're either too nice to say, well, we need to have an argument about this and we need to decide on one of these things, or they're not nice enough and they don't kind of back down. And then you end up with something that's like trying to cater to two quite different things. And maybe in reality, both of them could work, but you need to sort of, you'd be better off picking one than trying to merge them into something really ineffectual and kind of middle of the road. And yes, as you say, we use workshops and things, and that's a good way of, kind of forcing a decision to an extent and getting that alignment. But I see it a lot where it kind of goes on and on for such a long time. People get worn down by it, and then eventually, the thing that you can get people to agree on is just so far removed from that real, this is super specific, this is how we're differentiating, this is how we're like revolutionizing the market, this is the niche that we're going after, that it really doesn't end up adding any value. And because it's right at the core of everything downstream of that just ends up being as generic as the value proposition. It becomes really hard to train salespeople. Those salespeople can't, convert leads. It becomes really hard to attract leads because you can't put a message out that's really compelling. You don't know, where to target and all of those kinds of things. It's the thing that everything hangs off in a business. It's also the thing when you're building a product. If you are saying, I know who this product is for, I know what value I'm trying to deliver to them, you're able to make much smarter decisions about what the features and functionality of that should be. So for me, it's always the most critical thing. It's always really obvious when it's not clear. Within a second you can tell, because you go on a website, it should be the first thing you get hit in the face with. The headline on the homepage, very, very clearly, we're for these people, we help them do this, and this is how. That if that isn't the first thing you see on a website, I can probably describe for you the internal politics of that organization.
That can segue us quite nicely, because I know why you're so passionate about this, because the elephant in the room is that a lot of this kind of comes from working in or with consultancies, isn't it? And defining propositions within those consultancies, especially ones that have a tech element to their proposition, and it becomes quite a bit of a jumble Frankenstein of a proposition to try and as you said, like that's experiences that we've had in those positions are, you talk to a tech person or person that runs that, they have a very clear idea about what that proposition is. If you talk to a person who's a consultant, obviously they've got a very different view, and it creates quite an interesting mix. And from the outset, it just becomes jumbled on their website. it's a kind of external comms really.
Yeah. I think having worked for both consultancies and tech businesses, what value proposition means in both of those spaces is quite different. And actually, let's take consultancies. So there are different types of consultancies out there. There are consultancies that are a group of very, very smart people who can kind of drop in and solve almost any problem and figure out, what the right way to do that is, using a toolkit of, frameworks and skills that they have, all of those kinds of things. And that's kind of at one end of a spectrum. And then at another end of the spectrum, you have consultancies that come in and they run a predefined process that they use at every different business. So if you think about that as a value proposition, when you are saying, well, we can do literally everything, we're just super smart, and we don't always do the same thing, your value proposition is going to be probably quite high level and hard to define to an extent, because you're going to say, we help. You might know there might be a niche within businesses. It might be, sales directors, or sales directors in a specific sector, or something like that, where you could say, well, we help them. Ideally, you would know what the value is, but if you're doing all kinds of different things, you are probably going to end up in a space where it's like, well, we do help them solve problems, and that's really hard to pin down. And then how do you help them? Well, we help them with just a bunch of really smart people. It's by nature quite vague. And then at the other end of the spectrum, on consultancies, it's kind of much easier to pin down. But again, within the nature of consulting, you can apply a methodology to lots of different things. The difference between that and tech is that tech basically solves from a list of things, as same functionality. It delivers basically the same value, unless it's super customizable stuff, which is obviously a lot harder to scale. It solves problems like, we help you to hire better people, or we help you to communicate more effectively, or those kinds of things. It can't just be tossed into any old random thing and then be expected to kind of work some magic and do it the way that people can. So within consultancies, value proposition looks different to tech. Even kind of between different consultancies, there's different types of value propositions that you can get there. Where I think this becomes an issue is, and this does happen a lot, is we get a lot of people who start businesses that are consultancies and then build tech, and so then they become a consultancy with a tech product and kind of powered by technology, and then it's kind of unclear what they are. So is it a tech business where you need to go and have a conversation with someone and say, look, we solve these specific things? Is it a consultancy where we can do anything in the world, and where we have technology that supports that? And how do you create a value proposition for that, and how do you sell that? Because it's really different sales process, and it's you then end up being potentially quite opportunity led, and somebody goes out and sells a consulting project, and it looks completely different to the other one that somebody else sold, and then you're kind of in that position where you're like, well, what does this business actually do? And it's so difficult. It's so difficult to know how to develop the product. It's so difficult to know whether you even need to develop the product, or is it you just keep adding more consultancies?
What do they actually mean by product as well? That's kind of quite a different thing too. Is a product just essentially what is put out on a spreadsheet, or is it like a Power BI product, or is that actually something that they've built and it's kind of tested and defined? So I think there's also a weird thing there where it's we're not having a knock at consultancies. Maybe we are a little bit, but I think that's also quite a funny one. It's let's just shoehorn this product thing in it because that's the thing to do. But actually, what that kind of product is a bit questionable, I guess.
Mm. No, I don't think we're having a knock at consultancies. I think there is something in their DNA which makes it difficult for consultancies to become tech businesses, because the people that typically work in those environments just like solving open-ended problems and like kind of reinventing stuff a lot of the time. Tech is a different space, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think it will come full circle and it'll just be like, hey, look, no frills here. We're just a load of really smart people, and you can just chuck us in, and that's it. Like, there's no other kind of underlying element here. Methodology, we'll just figure it out as we go along, but just trust us, really smart people. Because I still think there is a market for that, and people do just want to buy like a load of smart people to come in and sort stuff out. And essentially, it's kind of it's jargon, like it's I guess diluted and not all waffled and all this kind of stuff with other elements that are chunked onto that proposition. But essentially, you might just come back and someone will be like, look, this is it. We're just 20 really smart people, and you can sort your stuff out. But
yeah, I think that's fair. I do think that's fair enough. If you're a very small consultancy, I think that works. And if you're a very big consultancy, I think that works. I think if you're somewhere in the middle, it becomes a bit more difficult because you're in that process of scaling, and you kind of need to have a bit more clarity on what you're doing. And lots of technology requires quite a lot of consultancy to function. The things like SAP and Salesforce and those kinds of things. I don't know how easy it is for somebody to just pull them out of the box and start using them. They require a lot of customer success, but they are implementing a technology product, and the consulting is there to implement it effectively. How do you even articulate kind of what one specific thing that they do? So that's kind of fine, and also so is being a consultancy that really just goes in and solves challenges with smart people, and occasionally uses technology to make those results more impactful. They're both fine, but you have to know which one of those things you are, and you have to be able to clearly articulate the value that you deliver, and they are very different things. And we're obviously in the space where we're trying to talk about kind of B2B tech businesses and founders and those kinds of things. I think what we're talking about, it applies to those types of businesses much more than it applies to consultancy businesses. And as I say, neither's inherently good or bad. It's just you kind of have to know which one you are if you're going to build out a strategy that's going to make it successful.
Okay. Well, we're about to embark on another tech business supported by consulting soon, so we can kind of fill you in on how we get on with that one. But I totally agree. And having both lived the painful experiences of going through those businesses and having to try and kind of work out what their core proposition is, and actually kind of market that. We learned the hard way on that one. So
yes. Before we go, I have one question. Adam, you talk a lot about these high brand moments. What exactly
do you
mean by that? And also, I'm kind of curious, where is this something that you've come up with yourself?
This is not my IP, unfortunately. Okay. I don't know where the IP came from, but it did stick, so it's obviously worked. But I do really love it, and I do think it makes it, in my head, really kind of easy to understand. And I think we touched upon it in the last podcast, so it would be very not to try and like kind of overlap on that, but really like a brand is created and then it's like peppered through into the product, into the website. And in a product, especially in like the B2B space, you're going to have like functional elements, and as I said before, like the product needs to be highly functional, has to use all those things at the kind of core at its heart. But it's really about how you can make that come to life through the brand and add that kind of layer of uniqueness within it, peppered in, that kind of brings it to life. And so if you picture it like this, you've got two kind of sides to a product. You've got the kind of low brand elements, which are more the functionality, usability stuff that you need to kind of do. Then you've got the high brand elements, which are like kind of showy bits, things that are going to bring the kind of more emotional, like against functional stuff. So, and they can be things like where you just kind of ramp in a bit more color, you ramp in a bit more like illustrations and little animations and micro animations and stuff like that, or just little subtle transitions and elements of things that are going to really appeal to the more emotional side of people's customer experience. So, and as I said before, like tone of voice again is another thing. Just these little kind of peppers in, which I kind of refer to them as being like hype brand moments. And I think from a more practical position, like where they actually kind of sit within an experience, like you'll find those on like onboarding screens. So where you've got a bit more real estate to like add that stuff, bring in that kind of high impact branding. You can really like go to town there. Login screens, like loading screens. There's little things that you can do around complex, like very functional products to still make it really interesting and really unique. And that's kind of things that I get nerdily, weirdly excited about because I like trying to make something that's quite, I guess, functional and maybe some people would think it's a little bit boring come to life through adding these elements of brand, because the products aren't boring. You just need that kind of bit of I'm not going to say magic, don't say magic, high brand moments to make them more fun and engaging, I guess.
Yeah, it's we were we've been doing a project on software supply chain security, which, as you can imagine, is a very, very complicated technical space, and it's powered by a open source product, and they have we actually went with them to KubeCon in Paris and stood on the stand. We had a little avocado character plushie. The open source platform is called Guac, and it was so cute. It basically drove an unbelievable amount of traffic to the stand, and we managed to have a lot of good conversations with with potential customers and users because this character had kind of popped up. And so then we decided to use the character in the product and, use the little kind of avocado person, as much as possible on those screens that you've just described. So when people are doing something functional, nobody wants a paperclip popping up and asking, it looks like you're trying to fix a vulnerability in a software package. But there are spaces where actually those little kind of moments of fun, when we went out and user tested it, people were like, "Oh, this is cool. I really like this. This is this is a break in the every other tool I use doesn't have an avocado with a face in it, but this one does."
And it is cool when you do user test those things, and like we've user tested it before it had those elements, and seeing when you get to those screens, like their reactions, you've connected on like a more emotional scale, which I think is really good. And generally, like something like this avocado is an example, but it just really softens up the whole experience. So it gets that balance and it's not just completely functional. So yeah, I think it's a really important part of the product experience and one that really kind of translates the brand. And I don't think in years before it hasn't been done the way it should be done like it is now.
Very good. Obviously, clearly a massive amount of stuff that we could talk about around brand, and it will not be the last time that we're speaking about this subject. But we are going to be talking in the next couple of episodes about product and how you really differentiate there, and also how you can build a following. So if you're interested in hearing about that stuff, please subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to them, wherever you are listening to them now. Go to cultproducts.yaya.co, and we're giving away a very cool free UI prototyping kit that you can use with AI to create your kind of first version of your product. And if you would like to join our community and be part of our beta testing group for this Cult Products product that we are in the process of developing, if you are starting a B2B startup, please sign up. The link will be in the show notes. Next time when we're back, we will not have the sore throats and hangovers from this weekend's Limp Bizkit gig, I would hope. Although Adam is going on a stag do this weekend. So we'll see what state he comes back in.
Back to square one. All right.
Thank you for listening.
Hit the jingle.
Hit